Let's talk about Chapter 3 of Noam Chomsky's book, Requiem for an American Dream 10 Principles for Concentration of Wealth and Power. Principle number 3 is simply redesign the economy. Now, he breaks this into two parts basically, financialization and offshoring. Let's start with financialization. He talked he says by 2007, right before the latest crash, the financial markets had literally 40% of corporate profit, far beyond anything in the past. And then he says this has changed a lot since the 1950s. In the 1950s, for as many years before, the United States economy was largely based on production. The United States was the great manufacturing center of the world. And he shows this graph here, which is the percent of GDP, which simply, I'll try to show it best, which simply states that there was 28% manufacturing, and the finance industry, the banks, the loaning banks, basically was only 11%. But what happened was, at that time, there was no speculation. And what a lot of speculation is right now is manipulating money to make more money. So in doing so, you actually produce nothing. Much of Wall Street doesn't produce nothing. Our biggest corporate sector produces nothing. It's amazing, and we all idolize it, right? It doesn't feed you, doesn't clothe you, doesn't bring you an iPhone. It's just simply it's manipulation. So at this time of the growing finance symbol, the ability to gamble on currencies and derivatives, watch The Big Short if you want a better understanding, and it's very educational. They began to deregulate markets, and this also regulated in free trade, which I'll get back to later. Also, with this rise of the business class, he writes, increasingly, the business of the country isn't production, at least not here. You can even see it in the choice of directors. The head of a major corporation back in the 50s and 60s was likely to be an engineer, somebody who graduated from a place like MIT, maybe industrial management. There was a sense in the ownership and management class that they better attend to the nature of society. This was their workforce. So we've slowly moved on to, socialize the gains to the society. When you make money, make your company better. Whatever that means, invest in your company, make workers better, make work life better, make the industry better, okay? So by growing your workers, in a way, you're growing the community. But it shifted to what I think Naomi Klein calls privatize the gains and socialize the losses. So again, make sure the management class keeps all the money and don't redistribute to your workers. Don't socialize it. He writes, by the 1980s, General Electric could make more profit playing games with money than it could by producing in the United States. You have to remember that General Electric is substantially a financial institution today. It makes half its profits just by moving the money around in complicated ways. It's very unclear that they're doing anything there of value to the economy. I agree. There also was offshoring. There's been a conscious decision to hollow out the production capacity of the country by shifting production to places where there's cheaper labor, no health and safety standards, no environmental conditions, etc. Northern Mexico, China, Vietnam, and so on, producers are still making plenty of money, but they're producing elsewhere. So you basically said, screw you workers, I'm going to find somebody in a more desperate country, i.e. China usually, Vietnam, and use them for slave wages so my profits go up, but now I don't have to pay you guys this minimum wage in America or the efficiency that you deserve to get paid in America. So what this has done this was done through these free trade agreements. And he writes, in fact, what are called international free trade agreements are not free trade at all. The trade system was reconstructed with a very explicit design of putting working people in competition with one another all over the world. What it's led to is a reduction in the share of income on the part of working people. It's been striking in the United States, but it's happening worldwide. It means that an American worker's in competition with the super exploited worker in China. So how are you going to be able to make the same product in America that you are in China? You can't. It's impossible. The third world country has nothing, so giving them a little bit means a lot, whereas you can't afford expensive America, which affords, you're supposed to have some kind of living wage, a $15 plus an hour wage at least. Incidentally, in China, the inequality has grown enormously. China and the United States are two of the most extreme in this respect. There are plenty of labor struggles in China trying to overcome this, but it's a very harsh regime. It's hard to do, but something's happening, and that's global. What the United States is exporting are operating values, the concentration of wealth tax on working people, deprivation of rights, exploitation, and so on. That's what's being exported in the real world. It's kind of an automatic consequence of designing trade systems to protect the rich and privileged. So that's what he talks about NAFTA, and if the TPP had passed, it would have been very bad. And then he talks about, all our jobs are gone. They're simply gone today, and that we're relegated to service jobs. So the service jobs can't leave. So that's something that a human physically needs to be there to work with the customer. So that could be an auto mechanic, a McDonald's server, any waiter, waitress is the most traditional service job, but hotel employee, something where human interaction is, constant. They're trying to get rid of that, right? They're trying to make automated cars so Uber doesn't have to pay its workers and stuff like that. The rise of AI is technology doesn't matter unless you morally, unless you disperse the wealth, unless everyone can take advantage of it. And if AI is made, but all the money goes to Jeff Bezos, you still don't have equality. It still doesn't promote equality or movements. And he talks about how since the rise of speculation, the financialization of life, that regulations like Dodd-Frank have been lobbied heavily against the banking sector and thus are not used anymore, and thus, have been gamed and allow dark money to persist within the regions of Wall Street. He also talks about a solution which I believe is socialism and is a co-op. So he talks about how, after the housing bubble and the financial crash, as you remember, the government pretty much took over the auto industry. It was virtually nationalized and in government hands. So instead, what happened, he writes, is that it went back to private hands, the same people, Ford, GM, etc. What could have happened is they could have let the people co-op have a say in what the company does and force the company to get off automobiles, in Noam Chomsky's argument, and focus on large-scale transportation, so it's better for us and for the environment, and so we don't have to spend all this time traveling all day, commuting, and get out of traffic. That's it for this chapter, really. Thank you, guys. Also, dang it, sorry. Please keep watching this video. So, another thing I would like you guys to do is, if you really like this video, help me out on Patreon and listen to my podcast on iTunes. It's on all my platforms. Check out psychowarfare.com. If you like what you hear, I post blogs, I post articles, and I love it if you guys could support the show.